Hi, welcome back to Outdoor Exploration. Today I have decided to talk about alder trees. When I was young, I believed they were a nuisance, mostly because our field was full of them and we as kids had to spend hours out there pulling the alders. Some of my friends even remember coming to our house and being asked to go out and pull some alders. You know, at that point they're about this tall, little tiny sticks with a few leaves, but they're unbelievably hard to pull out of the ground. And they're mostly considered a waste tree, I think, by the forest industry here. Just because they're not as valuable as some of the other things that are harvested. But in our world, in the ecosystem we live in, which you can see all around me here, they're essential. And I love them. I love the fact that they kind of take and provide for their ecosystem continuously, and they're a huge part, as are many other things, of making it what it is. So as you can see, I'm standing here. There's the kind of forest floor that peters down into the lake here, and the alders growing out of it, and this one is leaning out over it beautifully. Sometimes when they're not at the lake's edge, they're not leaning out so much, they can stand tall. Some of them have, you know, kind of symmetrical-ish branches and are wonderful for climbing, often when they're, you know, on a more flat ground. And so what do they provide here? First of all, the forest floor is full of their roots. I'll show you later a little bit of what they're doing specifically, but in general, these roots are actually stabilizing the either stream or lake bank. So they're keeping it from sloughing down into the lake and eroding further. And that's essential for, you know, maintaining this kind of selection of plants and an area for growing here and that one there. But it's not that simple. So they have these wonderful leaves. In the spring, they get catkins. They have male and female catkins. And let me just see if I can find one to show you. I should have found one before I started. It's a little late to find them, but sometimes you can find some old fallen ones. Come look up here anyway. There is one hanging here. It's an old one. It's brown and hanging from this this leaf up there, or branch. I don't see any on the ground, but often they're just everywhere. So basically what happens is, in the springtime, they grow, both male and female. They produce piles of pollen, which is a huge allergen. A lot of people have problems with alder pollen. In fact, some people actually have, you know, massive reactions, anaphylactic reactions. They end up in hospital. It can be terrible. But the male catkins fall off after they're finished, and the females, which have been pollinated, grow and, well, actually they kind of shrink, but they're busy growing seeds, and then they spend all summer developing on the trees. And I don't see any to show you up there right now, but there are some somewhere, and they become these little things that we know as cones mostly, but actually when they're on a deciduous tree like this, they're called strobills. And I mean, it's fine if you call them a cone, but I don't think all the botanists would agree. Anyway, I'm not a botanist, so I'm okay with people calling them cones. But technically they're not. They're quite different than the cones that you find in conifers, which is why they're called conifers, you know, the evergreens like pines and firs. So these fall down on the ground everywhere, and they fall into the water. And if you come down here, just a minute, we'll have an intermission. So we had a little visit with Bear. Bear is now gone, back to the creek, or the lake rather. Down here, there are also some strobills in the lake water. And as you can see, there are sticks and lilies that are growing up, plus some alder leaves that are yellow because they're starting to decompose and they lose their chlorophyll, and all kinds of dirt, obviously, that sloughs down from here. So what happens is, up here we have the humus, the forest floor, or it's not always forest, it's often meadow, because alders like to grow in a disturbed place. And the leaves and the strobiles and the catkins, the pollen, the insects, dead insects, moss, all kinds of things are falling down here. The logs also, and decomposing. They're a home for the animals, they're a home for moss to grow, and all of these plants are taking nitrogen from the roots and the decomposing minerals and elements, just all kinds of different elements that they need from all of these decomposing and growing things here in this sort of soup of life. And a lot of it is swooshing down here, where it's called humic substances, this stuff that's getting into the lake, or if it was a stream or pond, into the water. And apparently all of this stuff is really, really essential for the life, whether it's insects, fish, even the ducks that eat those insects or fish. Everything that's living here is also benefiting from what has been sloughing down in there. And the strobiles, among other things, also provide tannins. So as they decompose, the tannins release, and apparently that is great for the fish. In fact, I just learned recently, which was what inspired me to make this video, that aquarium keepers, owners, whatever you call them, people who keep aquaria fish, actually sometimes go get alder strobiles to put in their tanks to release the tannins to help their fish have a more natural kind of pond life. Apparently even some tilapia breeders do that. The flies love this rich habitat of life, and they love me. So let me stand up here and head back over here. So to talk about more of the rich habitat of life, the alder tree itself actually has various medicinal qualities and, well, useful qualities for people. It's an excellent firewood. It burns rather hot. It grows very quickly. So people can have stands of alders that they grow. Alders can actually live for, I think, up to 100 years or so. But if you grow alders for about 20 years, you'll have good, solid, average size, easy to fall trees that you can cut up into firewood and have quite a good supply that is renewable because they grow fast, you can replant, etc. But on top of that, the inner bark is actually red. So this is called a red alder. And if you scrape this away, you'll find this red stuff. And first of all, you can make dye from it. It's been used by various people to make dye for many different things. It also, it contains salicin. Salicin is the substance that when you consume it, it becomes salicylic acid in your stomach, which is an anti-inflammatory. I almost said inflammatory, that's not what I mean. And it's an anti-inflammatory, and it helps headaches and things. It's basically aspirin. This is the same as willows, birches. I'm not sure if they have salicylic or salicin, sorry. But I think it's a possibility. This whole family of trees actually has some degree of it. So I have come over here to this other alder tree, where I feel I can dig, to show you some of the roots. Here. Notice that this one too is growing near a stream, and there's all kinds of vegetation around here, which is fabulous. And the reason that vegetation is getting the nitrogen it wants, or rather needs, is because this alder tree is providing it. Here we go. So, now I know this seems brutal, but it's a small root from a very big tree that has hundreds of them, and I am going to break off just a piece of it here to show you up close. And I'll rinse it in the handy stream. So many mosquitoes. So, if you look up close, you will see the red color, like I was talking about, red alder. And along here, all the little tiny dots that you see, or I don't know what they'll look like too, but they're little lumps. Those are the nodules that grow on the roots. And basically what happens is the tree up there takes the nitrogen from the air, you know, along with all the other elements that it's pulling in, and sequesters it in these nodules, which then through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria, a certain bacteria, I can't remember what it's called, something like Frankie or Frank, I don't know, I can't remember. It actually puts that nitrogen into the soil where it becomes available for all these plants. So if you're a gardener, you probably know that nitrogen is one of the most important fertilizer components that people often put into their garden, whether in the form of natural fertilizer or chemical fertilizer. And this is how it actually happens in the wild. Peas and beans also can sequester nitrogen in the soil, so those are good for your garden. And alders are great for your garden for the same reason. And this is why. The nodules, well, and the bacteria. Okay, so I have grabbed a couple of leaves, couple of twigs actually. I've noticed actually that this one has some fungus growing on the back of it, so I'm not going to eat that one. But just to show you, alder leaves are light colored on the bottom and darker colored on the top, which is because, I believe that's because all the chloroplasts are up here where they gather the light and are doing their business of sequestering those, well, not just nitrogen, but all kinds of things, including carbon. Thank you. Thank you, my brain. I finally found it. And then releasing oxygen for us to breathe. But in addition to that, as I was talking about salicin, the young leaves and the leaf buds, which if you look closely, you can see in the middle there's a little leaf bud, and these are some of the younger leaves. Sometimes the young leaves are like this one. It's been eaten, but it's a lighter color. That's because it's young. And in these younger leaves, there is also salicin. So, as a disclaimer, I am not a doctor, I'm not a pharmacist, I am not recommending that anybody does this, but I personally take the leaf bud and a leaf or two, chew them out, and basically suck the juice out of them, leaving this little gross green blob. Throw that away. And the juice contains the salicin, which somewhere inside of me now is becoming salicylic acid and helping my migraine if I had one, which I don't right now. Yeah, so that's one amazing thing about these. I'm noticing some kind of parasite on here. I don't know what it is. Very interesting. Look at this up close. Cool. Yeah, so those are alder leaves. And I guess that's all I can think of to say at the moment. But basically, alder is a wonderful plant. I often have been relieved to find a moss-covered alder log in a hot forest where I can sit down and relax. It's cool. The skin of an alder is this white, gray, smooth, cool in the summer kind of thing to lean against. Really, all these amazing little adaptations aside, they're just wonderful trees. That's it. I love them. Happy exploring. Okay, this is super exciting. The alder is also a place for molting. So here, I'm not sure if you called it molting really, or should call it emerging. I just noticed these two tiny little wingtips shining on either side of this leaf, and I look around the back, and what have I found? A dragonfly emerging from its larval exoskeleton, whatever you would call that. And yeah, he's just holding on there and very, very carefully and very slowly pulling his abdomen, his very long dragonfly abdomen, out of the exoskeleton. So cool.